Great and merciful loving Father, whose holy and righteous name is Yahweh, this is your servant, Yisrayl Hawkins, Father, along with the men of your house, asking permission to come before you in unity with the body of priests, through our pastor and overseer, the great Clan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through the authority of your Son, Yahshua Messiah. And it is with great joy, Father, we do come before you for another opportunity, Father Yahweh, to continue in the study of your prophecies and of your laws. And we do pray that you would bless us, Father Yahweh, with the wisdom and understanding and knowledge to understand these teachings, Father Yahweh, to gain a better understanding of your plan, Father. And we just pray for your strength and guidance, Father Yahweh, in overcoming sin, Father Yahweh, that we can take on your perfect righteous character and be counted worthy to serve you and your people forever. We do love you, Father Yahweh. We do praise you and thank you, and do we ask these things in the name of your Son, Yahshua Messiah. Hallelujah. Praise Yahweh. Everybody, please go ahead and be seated. Okay. We're continuing in the book. There is someone out there, and I'm thinking that we're somewhere around, I think, page 325, 326, somewhere in that neighborhood. 328. Okay, praise Yahweh. But you know me, I like going back and kind of rehearsing things just a little bit. But we are in the part of this book concerning Yekeskia, the vision that Yekeskia saw for the rebuilding of the temple in these last days. And in the book of Yekeskia, we were seeing that there was a prophecy that was given of, and measurements given of, a temple that was to be rebuilt. And the interesting things about this is you need to remember that the prophet Yekeskia was inspired to write this particular prophecy 600 years, actually about 600 years before the temple was destroyed in 70 CE. And it's within this particular prophecy, there's the measurements. There's complete measurements of the temple that had never been built. The measurements that Yekeskia were given, and you go back and you think about the ability of Yahweh and the way that Yahweh can hide things in plain sight. These things have been there. These measurements and everything have been there. For thousands of years. And it's not until these last days, in the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, that these measurements were actually understood. And it just goes to show that Yahweh will withhold the information from the unrighteous, because remember, the unrighteous, the wicked have no understanding. There's no way the wicked can understand these things. And it took a teacher to actually, to spend the time, a righteous teacher, to be able to take a look at these and spend the time and actually figure these measurements out through the inspiration of Yahweh. And you can see the temple model over there is the result, that is a scale model of this temple using those measurements. And I remember when the first, when that model was first presented, it was actually used to help the people that were actually working on the dimensions and trying to piece this together. They used it to help them understand what was going on, and that is the ultimate result of that. It fits that pattern. It fits perfectly with the area prophesied that it was to be set on. The generalized thinking, I think the general thinking, and the wars and things that have been fought over that Temple Mount, the general consensus of the people are that the temple, in order for the temple to be rebuilt, the Dome of the Rock, the Allah Aska Mosque, that structure that you see actually sitting to the south of the temple over there, that would actually have to be destroyed in order for this temple to go up. That's the common conception. But in Yekeskia's prophecies, in the vision that Yekeskia saw, if you remember in Yekeskia 40, verse 1 through 5, it shows that he was actually brought to the Temple Mount in the last days, in our current day. In Yekeskia chapter 40 here, verse 2, it says, "In the visions of Yahweh he brought me into the land of Israel and set me upon the greatly exalted mountain, and on it like the building of a city to the south." And, this was kind of, this undoubtedly puzzled Yeketsky because he saw this building, and it was a single building, and it was a city building. It was actually a public building that was there. And never before had there ever been, a public building that had sat to the south of the Temple Mount. But there is one there today, and that's what we see. That is what is actually there today. And in the measurements that Yeketsky was given, he was actually shown that there was going to be he was shown this public building that was on the south, but the temple was actually sitting to the north. And there was in the March-April 1983 issue of the Biblical Archaeological Review. Let's see here. I do have I actually got a picture of it here, but it actually shows here on the. It shows a picture here of the dome of the tablets, and what it shows here is this Dr. Kaufman in this article here. He has proved, he proved through that article that the first and second temples sat exactly in line with the Golden Gate, with the East Gate. And that actually proves that the original temple site was about 330 feet northwest of where the Dome of the Rock sits now. And this Dome of the Tablets was actually sits where the Holy of Holies sat in the temple. So it was, through this work, and then through the measurements and stuff that were given through the prophet Yeketsky, and gives us the result of what we see over here now. And the significance of that is, that the temple can be rebuilt. And it can be rebuilt, and it can sit side by side with the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And it shows that there was actually a dividing wall there, and Pastor even brought it out here recently, that there was a wall. There was actually a wall between the two structures. And this wall between the two structures served absolutely no military purpose, but it was a privacy fence. Kind of like a privacy fence to keep so each person or each group could worship in their own way. Let's see here. Okay, on page 328 here, on top of page 328 here, it says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, an urgent plea to leaders of all nations." Pastor shows here, he says, "You have just read the plain and simple plan to bring peace, not just to Israel, but to all the world. This plan, although written thousands of years ago, is viable for our time and a simple solution for peace." It says a united peace plan for this generation. And it says, Chagiah, the same prophet who urged the people to rebuild the temple, was inspired to write for these last days in Chagiah chapter 2, verse 6 through 9. It says, "This is what Yahweh of hosts says. Once again, in a little while, I will shake the heavens, the earth and the sea and the dry land. It says, I will shake all nations, and the most desired thing of all the heathen will come." This most desired thing. "And I will fill this house with glory, says Yahweh. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, says Yahweh of hosts. The glory of this latter house will be greater than the glory of the former, says Yahweh, and in this place I will give peace." And Pastor, he shows here, he says, I urge each of you to do your part in bringing about the fulfillment of this prophecy. And Pastor, he's pleading to the nations here, showing that this can be done. There's this rabbi in writing the Torah Today column for the Jerusalem Post in February of 1989 urged the rebuilding of the temple, saying, "Every generation in which the temple has not been built is as if the temple were destroyed in it. Is ours perhaps," it says, "is ours perhaps such a generation. This generation can be the one to bring peace to this planet." And this is, Pastor's plea here. And, he's urging the people to look at this plan and to accept this plan and actually put this plan into motion, and that would bring peace to that region, or at least, the idea is that it would at least solve one of the issues with the constant fighting over this piece of real estate. But this is that. Let's see here if I can get that real quick. This is the cover of the Biblical Archaeological Review, And this is that Dome of the Tablets. This is the Dome of the Tablets. This is where the Holy of Holies actually set. It is actually in this place here, and that actually to the south there you can see the Dome of the Rock there. And then you kind of get an overview here. This is kind of an overview of the Temple Mount as well. And here again you see the Dome of the Rock, the mosque here, and then up over here, in this little area right over here, this is this structure right here, and this is actually where the Holy of Holies sat. And when you superimpose that, you place all of that together. And this is what you come up with. This is the plan view of what you come up with here. This is that Dome of the Tablets here, and you can see it sets to the north. And then when the measurements are applied and everything is in place, you've got the temple building here, and then you can see how it will actually line up with that east gate. So that's just kind of a little bit of some of this stuff can be a little hard to visualize, but hopefully that helps just a little bit. But this is the peaceful solution, the peaceful solution to rebuilding the temple. So there is a peaceful solution for doing this. Now on page 330, starting on page 330 here, we see, blow the trumpet in Zion, save our people. Yahweh foretells of another peaceful solution. Another peaceful solution? It says Yahweh's prophecies are accurate. Every prophecy that Yahweh has given us has been 100% accurate. There's no disputing it, not one bit, 100% accurate. The very fact that Yahweh reveals mankind would have in this last generation the technology capable of destroying all life from planet Earth proves that He knows and can foretell these events for us. Remember, Pastor has shown us, he's told us this over and over and over again. Fulfilled prophecy proves all things. And we can see the prophecies, and we've seen the prophecies fulfilled in detail. Again, I go back to the prophecies concerning the establishment of the house of Yahweh in the last days, because that's a recent prophecy that we can see. We can see the prophecy of the two witnesses. We can see that. That is recent prophecy as well. So these prophecies, they continue and they will continue to come to pass. Like the speaker was saying this last, this last Sabbath, how much do we need? How much more proof do we need? Yahweh throughout history has shown, for over the 6,000 year time period, He's shown over and over and over through history, the fulfillment of the prophecies in detail. We should be able to now look at these prophecies, and believe in Yahweh 110%, that He's going to accomplish what He says He's going to do, and that what He expects of us is what we need to do, and the overall, the true blessings that are going to come from these things. Yeah, I remind you that up until 100 years, until the last 100 years, mankind was still traveling by horse and wagon, and we've seen again. We've seen the sermons that have been given on the increase in knowledge in the last days. We saw the physical, the physical representation of that. We saw that here a couple of feasts ago. With the displays that were down here about the increase in technology. From the horse and wagon all the way up to the ballistic missile that's still sitting down here. We've seen that increase in technology. Look at the increase in technology that you're carrying probably in your pocket right now. Cell phones were, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, cell phones, took up something the size of a suitcase, or a small suitcase anyway. And you had to lug them around, and they had a battery life of probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours, if that. But now, you've actually got miniature computers that we carry with us that are at our disposal, and we can use these things to, we can access all kinds of knowledge. We can access all kinds of things. 15, 20 years ago, regular computers weren't even that powerful. The power you have in your cell phone now is the computing ability there is much more advanced than the computer technology that was used to send man to the moon. I mean, it's really, it's the advancement, the advancement in the technology. I mean, and it's continued to grow by leaps and bounds. And Pastor, he shows us here. He says, when I was a child, I helped my father and our neighbors on their farms, using horse and mule to draw plows and work the land. And remember, Pastor said he had running water. Remember that? He went out to the well, pumped it, and ran it into the house. That was the running water that he had. But he carried it. The water was carried, from the well, physically carried from the well into the house. And most restrooms, they weren't even out. They weren't even inside. They were outside. Very few people had radios. There was no television. All of the technology we have today, including the bombs and missiles that carry them, have been developed in the last 100 years alone. Yahweh is very specific in his prophecies, and we again, this is the things that we're rehearsing, kind of like the sermon that was brought about this past Sabbath. We're rehearsing these things. This Yahweh is very specific in his prophecies. He didn't say that somebody might develop some kind of explosive that might kill some people. He didn't give you any room for doubt there. He foretold that this technology would be developed. Not only this, he gave the exact time period in which this technology would be invented and what nation would be the first to invent and use these powerful nuclear weapons. He even showed us the colors of the explosion and the fallout caused by the explosions. Is that specific enough for us? Yahweh inspired his prophets to write these facts for us thousands of years ago, saying that they would all come to pass in this last generation. Not that they would come to pass, but you think about the wisdom and the ability that somebody had, that he has, to be able to look into the future and know exactly when these things were going to come to pass. I mean, it's mind blowing. It says, and the prophecies have come to pass exactly like the prophets said they would, when the prophets said they would, in this last generation, right down to the last detail. No mere human can foretell the future. Remember what was talked about with the king? The king went to the soothsayers and they could not recount the king's dream and the interpretation of it. Remember? But yet Yahweh's prophet was able to do that. But no man can tell you what will occur today, tomorrow, or even 1 hour from now. But Yahweh can, and unless something is done right now, the future prophecies will also come to pass as scheduled. And Pastor has said, if everybody would band together, if everybody would go ahead and stop practicing this foolishness and submit completely to righteousness and start and embrace and practice this peaceful solution, that this thing could be turned around, this thing could be stopped. But he shows, and the prophecies actually show that the people are not going to do this. But that doesn't stop the warning from going out, because the people have to be warned. The warning is going out about what the results of sin are, what the ultimate result of that is going to be. And mankind is going to have to experience that for themselves. They're going to have to see in order to believe. Now, the things mankind are going through, they haven't been called. The majority of the world hasn't been called, so the things that they're experiencing right now are temporary. When somebody that has not been called dies, they go to sleep, they're going to be resurrected. And they're going to have history. They're going to have the 6,000 years of history of what sin brings, of what iniquity brings. They're going to have all of that set before them. But, they're also going to have the blessing. They're going to have the blessing of seeing what the benefit of only 1,000 years of the rule of Yahweh and the peaceful solution of what Yahweh's laws bring. And they're going to be resurrected. They're going to be able to see that. They're going to be able to compare those things. They're going to be able to see it. They will have experienced it. They will have lived it. They will have lived and experienced the cancer. They will experience the sickness, the war, the disease, the hatred. They will have experienced all of these things. And they're going to be given the opportunity to choose, just as we are given the opportunity to choose now. But Pastor shows here, he says, all nations are going to wage war against one another. Nuclear weapons will be detonated. And 4/5 of the world's population will be destroyed. The prophecies show that. And we know, since Yahweh's prophecies are 100% accurate, we know that these things are coming to pass. They are going to come to pass. They haven't come to pass yet. But as each day passes, the day that those prophecies will come to pass gets closer. Remember, we're told that one of the apostles said, our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. Think about that. Yahweh knows when these prophecies are going to come to pass. He knows it. We don't. Just because we don't know when the bomb's going to drop, doesn't mean that it's not going to, or doesn't mean that it's that far off. We have to endure. We have to put forth our effort in overcoming. We have to put forth our effort in learning as much of this peaceful solution as we can, as practicing it as much as we can, and taking on as much righteous character as we can. Because we're going to be used, when we qualify, we're going to be used to teach these things to the nations. Now, unless we act now and turn these prophecies of destruction, of doom around, millions of people will again be destroyed. This is what the prophets of old have foretold, and we have absolute proof showing we can believe what they say. Remember, Yahweh's prophecies have had a 100% accuracy rate so far. Well, they're going to continue to have a 100% accuracy rate. So what have we done? What have we done to find solutions and have peace? Mankind has been around, for a little over, right at about 6,000 years, and he's followed the same way of life, the way of continual war. Remember back in Genesis, back in Genesis chapter 4, the way of Cain, the curse of Cain. Each time a conflict arises, now think about this, every time a conflict arises and we go to war, thousands of people are killed. Okay? And yet we just keep doing the same things over and over again, either forgetting or just plain disregarding the fact that war was the result of our actions before. Even though we have 6,000 years of history plainly showing us that we as nations are unsuccessful in what we are doing, we never change our tactics. Doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Instead of placing the blame where blame belongs, on our own actions, we place it on the other nations, and of course the other nations, what do? They turn around, they place the blame on the other nation as well. So you got the finger pointing going this way. So it continues year after year, century after century. It's just a vicious cycle that never ends. Each nation's prison system is operated on the same principles. They operate on the same way. It says crime is on the rise. More and more people are put in prison. It's like a big old revolving door. The prison system, the criminal justice system, they say that they call it a Department of Corrections, or they talk about it as a Department of Rehabilitation. But unless somebody takes an initiative upon their own to do something for themselves, to better themselves, the system isn't going to do it for them. It just isn't. It isn't there. It's a misnomer when they call it that. What they do, what it is, it's simple. The prison system is simply a warehousing system. You've heard the term out of sight, out of mind? What takes place? When you're thinking, if you think you're going through the house and you're cleaning up before Sabbath and you got your broom and you got this big old pile of dirt and kind of looking around and lift up the edge of the rug and sweep that stuff up under there and pat it down. Yeah, the house is clean, right? Okay, you got it all nice and clean, no dirt around. The dirt's just hidden. It's out of sight. It's still there, but it's out of sight. So it's not really clean, and it's the same way with society. Until something is done to actually address the problem, and that's the key. To address the problem, you have to address the problem. You can't address the symptom. You can't be reactive. The whole system, the whole criminal justice system, the prison system, it's not just that, but it's even the way that the nations deal with one another. It's all a reactive system. They react to the way they react to what somebody else does. And the only way to fix it is to actually be proactive. Now, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program is a proactive system because it teaches people how to act. It teaches them how to think. It teaches them what it is that they need to do to prevent the problem to begin with. But it shows here, it says we just keep building. It says crime is on the rise and more people are being put in prison. Yet we just keep building larger prisons. And as the prisons as others become overcrowded, even though we can plainly see that this system is unsuccessful, we never change what we're doing. We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And what do you think is being taught when the people go into the prison system? Well, they're definitely not being taught they're not being taught righteousness, that's for sure. For the most part. Let me rephrase that. For the most part, because there is work of the Peaceful Solution that is going on in certain prison systems. But in the majority of the systems, you don't have any righteousness that's being taught there. Who is it that runs the prison system? Well, it's actually the Roman Catholic Church is who's running them. In order to be a chaplain, I know in the state of Texas, in order to be a chaplain, one of the requirements are that you must be an ordained Catholic deacon. That is a requirement. That's a job requirement. You can pull it up. You can go to the website. You can pull up the requirements for a chaplain. And you can see what it is that they require. Ordained Catholic deacon. That is a first requirement. But it shows here that it says nothing is solved. The fact is that nothing is solved in our prison system, and nothing is solved by going to war. Yet these are two of every nation's so-called solutions to national and world problems. They have never worked before, so why should we expect them to all of a sudden start working now? Nothing is done to actually solve the problem, nor change the rut that we have gotten ourselves into. Rather than putting real solutions to work, ever-increasing taxes are imposed upon citizens to support the armies and the prison systems. And that is, when you see people that have been involved, that have been involved with the prison system, that have been in there, you can see the frustration. You can kind of see the frustration in their eyes. You can hear it in their voice, because some of these men truly want to get out of the rut that they're in, but they don't have a solution. They don't have a way. There's nothing that's offered. You know how many prison systems? Do you know how many prison facilities? Texas is actually in 2012. Texas was actually the highest in the nation for people that are incarcerated in the prison system. So Texas is number one there. You know how many people were incarcerated in the Texas prison system in 2012? 152,000. That's in the state prison system. That's not counting county jails. That's not counting city jails. That's counting state facilities. You know how many state prison facilities there are in the state of Texas? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 114. Yeah, that's a guesstimate. That's a rough guesstimate, and that's just prison system. That is just people that have been convicted of a felony and have been sentenced to anywhere from 180 days to what they call state jail, all the way up to life in prison. 114. Now imagine how many people are actually sitting in county jails. Add that number to it. There's 212, 213 counties in the state of Texas. Add that number to it. Okay, now it's county facilities. How many cities are there in the state of Texas. Now start adding those in there too. You can start to see just how big and how many people are, can be subject to this. But there are no real solutions put to work. It's a warehousing system. They don't want to use the, they don't want to utilize they don't want to utilize a solution. Most of them don't want to utilize a solution because that affects their bottom line. It affects the almighty dollar. Because the prison system, along with war, war is very profitable. So are prisons. But remember here, we mentioned Genesis. Remember in Genesis chapter 4. Remember we talked about the curse of Cain, about the way of continual war, vengeance and retaliation. Genesis 4:14. Remember it says, "You shall be a fugitive and a vagabond." And remember, Pastor brought out, that means ever searching for peace. Mankind, they're ever searching for peace, but yet they ignore the way to peace. They ignore the solution to peace. There shall be continual war, vengeance and retaliation. That vengeance. We kind of brief, sometimes we kind of look these words over really quick, but vengeance means to an extreme or excessive degree with a great force or vehemence. And that vehemence means aggressive. So this vengeance, it means with aggressiveness. It means with fierceness. It's marked by forceful energy. And get this, vehemence is also intensely emotional. Intensely emotional. What is it the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teaches us how to deal with? Our emotions. It shows us how we can get these things, how we can keep these things under control through the simple practice of self-control. Through the simple practice of the STOP acronym, stop, thinking and considering our options and proceeding with the right choice. Recognizing when these thoughts come into our mind, recognize them that when they do come in, is this thought beneficial or not? Well, if it's not beneficial, we need to replace it with something that is. We're never taught that. We're never taught that when we're young, but it's absolutely necessary for us in order to live in peace with one another. We have to be able to maintain. We have to be able to have that characteristic. We have to have that patience. We have to have that. Because if we had this power, and Pastor has mentioned this before, if we had the power right now of to be able to wipe somebody just off the face of the earth, if we don't have our emotions under control, if we cannot exercise that self-control, somebody comes over and steps on your toe and they hit you on a wrong day, you can just look at them and poof, that person's gone. We can't do that. We have to have these things under control. We have to have these things under control. It says, for 6,000 years now, every nation has used the same tactics to try to prevent war and crime. Build an army larger than the armies of any other nation. And Pastor says here, he says, let's think about this for a second. Let's be honest here. Do we really think that we're the only nation that can increase our armed forces? Do we really think that? Is there any nation out there that can come up with a weapon or come up with a set of weapons or some tactics that would put the United States in danger? Of course there are. Do we really think that we're the only nation that can increase our armed forces? The way that all nations are following at this time is only leading us to larger, more destructive wars. They escalate. There was a commercial that was done here a few years ago, and I can't remember the name of it. But it started out with one individual bumping into another one, and the one got hit with what'd they do? They used one got pushed, then it went to a stick, then it went to a rock, then it went to something else, and it ultimately went to a nuclear weapon, where basically nobody won. And it was not really a comical way to look at it, but it was a very simple and effective way to look at the way of this vengeance and retaliation about this way of Cain. And it was a simple but effective way to drive home a very, very important point. That this way of building a bigger army, building a bigger weapon, isn't going to solve anything. Ultimately, it's going to be the undoing. Ultimately, it will lead to the destruction of 4/5 of the earth's population. And if Yahweh didn't step in, it would wipe everything out. But Yahweh is going to let it to get that way. He is going to allow it to get to that point just to prove to mankind what the way of sin brings. He has to do that, because if he stepped in beforehand, then mankind would always have in the back of their mind, well, if Yahweh would have just kept his nose out of it, this would have worked. Well, he's going to allow it to get to the point where there's going to be no doubt in anybody's mind of what the way of sin brings. And what have the nations done to solve crime? Politicians have always made the same three promises to the public, pretending that these are viable solutions to today's extreme crime problem. Number 1, increase police forces. Number 2, build larger prisons. Well, you increase police forces, what do? You start arresting more people, then you're going to need more prisons to put them in. And then 3, keep those prisoners in there longer. Keep that warehousing, keep them in there, keep them locked up, keep them warehoused away. It doesn't solve the problem. That just transposes a problem. The problem now doesn't necessarily, well, the problem does continue to exist in the community, but what it does is it concentrates the problem into a much smaller facility, into a much smaller area. But the difference is, again, it's just like sweeping the dirt underneath the rug. Society generally doesn't have to look at it. But it hasn't solved the thing. They have not only promised to do those things, but they also have used the same tactics for centuries. But these tactics do not solve the crime problem, nor will they ever. They never will, until you address the root of the problem. If you have a driveway full of nails and you drive out every day and you run over the same board that has a nail in it, every day you're going to get a flat tire. That's just a given. Keeping doing the same thing over and over and over, changing the tire, fixing the tire, driving over the same board with a nail in it, the tire's going to continue to go flat until you do something about it. You move the darn board, you get rid of it, you solve the problem. Changing the tire doesn't solve the problem. Removing the board does. Locking people away in the prison system does not solve the problem. Teaching them a way to deal with their emotions, teaching them what it means to not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to commit fornication, not to take things, not to trespass. That is what's going to work. You address the problem. You have to address the problem. That's the only way that it's going to work. It says these tactics of the world, they do not solve the crime problem, nor will they ever. In fact, crime will continue to increase as long as this approach is taken. The politicians know this, but they continue to boast that they are getting tough on crime. Using these tactics is not being tough against crime, it's oppressing the already oppressed. The problems never go away. The people's conditions continue to get worse and worse. And these problems, they go extremely deep. I mean, it's not just necessarily with that individual, but it may lie with the entire community. It may lie with the entire neighborhood. It may lie with the entire community. It may lie with the entire city. But the problems never go away, and the people's condition will continue to get worse. And as the people become more oppressed than before, it only makes the problem worse. It is obvious that by making these empty promises, politicians are only trying to convince the public to trust them to solve their problems so that they will be voted into office. Do we honestly think that the tactics which have not worked for 6,000 years will suddenly start to solve the problems? Look at the questions that Pastor is posing here. Do you really think that the things that have been going on now for 6,000 years, do you think they're going to work this time? Is it just one more time? Is it going to work? Come on, just one more time. It's got to work this time. It's not going to continue, not until the problems are addressed. And the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, addresses each and every one of those things. There is a way that we could go, Pastor says here, that would stop all wars and all crimes. Remember the campaign that was done here, what was it, last year? Maybe a year ago? Remember what the name of that campaign was? Stop All Wars. Wow, where did we hear that before? Back in 19 when? 1997. That's stop all wars. Wow. That was thought of way back then. But there is a way that we could stop that will stop all wars and all crimes. A way that will keep many thousands from being killed in war, that will solve the crime population, and that will release the heavy tax burden that is now upon all nations. There is a way. And it's the same approach that Yahweh will take when his kingdom begins to rule the universe. Now, Yahweh is proving right now that mankind's way isn't going to work. But Yahweh's way is going to work. But we can start to use this approach now, and if we did, millions of lives and tax dollars are going to be saved within the next few years alone. For 6,000 years now, we've taught our children in every nation and in every generation that the approach for peace is war. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The only way you can have peace is to go to war. That just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But this misguided education has not brought peace. If war was going to bring peace, then why are we still having wars? Why isn't the world filled with peace? I mean, there've been enough wars, throughout the generations. Boy, this should be the most peaceful place around, but it's not. It's because that tactic never will work. And because each generation does what they are taught to do, the result will be the same all over the world: war. What can we do to solve the problem and have peace? Each generation in each country does what it is taught to do. So what we need to do is teach our children peace. That's where it starts. It starts with our own families. It starts with ourselves. But we need to teach our children peace in order for them to learn peace. And in teaching our children how to conduct themselves in a peaceful manner, not only are we teaching them, but we're also teaching ourselves. But we are benefiting from it when we teach our children to learn peace. There are 613 perfect laws of peace in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Holy Scriptures, in every Bible. In the history of mankind, they have never been taught universally. They have never been taught everywhere. They have not been taught because the religions of this world have followed the deception of the gods for thousands of years, and they still do even to this day. This deception has become so great that it is now against the federal laws of each nation to teach the laws of peace in any school. You can't bring up teaching the laws out of the Holy Scriptures in the school. They have that separation, so-called separation from church and state. But boy, oh boy, you can sure color up some. See, what do they got? What pagan day they got coming up here? Boy, they can. You can sure color up pictures of rabbits laying colored eggs. You can sure that can be taught. You can, they can color up and be taught pictures of witches flying around on brooms and pumpkins and gourds that have pictures and have faces carved into them. They can flying reindeer and a fat man in a red suit flying around the world. They can have all of those things there, but they can teach that. They can have that. They can have those things in there, but they can't be taught the laws of peace. The United States of America and Israel included, it says, and in their deception gets much worse than this. Religious organizations, churches, civic clubs, and synagogues the world over actually forbid these laws for peace from being taught in their places of worship too. And I'm speaking of the laws found in every Bible they claim to follow. He says, if you don't believe me, just try teaching these laws or a portion of them and you will see. They will bar you from their churches. Try going into a Catholic church on a Sunday and standing up and telling them that they need to be keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. Or any church. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, I don't know what the others are. You name it, doesn't matter. Try telling them. See if you're not escorted off the premises rather quickly. Pastor Shoster says they will bar you from their synagogues, and if you return, they're going to call the police and have you removed from the premises, and you'll get to go to one of the county jails for criminal trespassing. Why? Because you were trying to teach them the laws of peace. You were simply showing them, you were showing them that they were not following the laws that they claim to follow. They're not following the Bibles as they claim that they do. It would be no different for any one of today's preachers either. If they were to see their mistakes and turn to teaching Yahweh's laws in their churches, they too would be barred from the premises and replaced by another preacher. Think about it. The same laws that are taught by the Savior, his apostles, and the prophets are now illegal to teach. At times they were even illegal to teach in their day as well. The 613 laws that promise absolute peace have been replaced by man-made laws of and by the people that in 6,000 years of history have never brought peace. If you've ever been to a law library or seen pictures of a law library, they have walls and walls and walls and walls of books. And in each one of these books they have laws. And they have explanations of these laws, and they say, well, this law was superseded by this one and this one because this one didn't work. We're going to add to it. I mean, it's ridiculous and confusing the way that they do that. But you take a look, and next time you take a look at your book of Yahweh, go to Genesis chapter 1, and then go to the very last chapter of Deuteronomy, and take a look at how thick those pages are. And it's contained within those pages that are going to bring peace not only to the world, but to the universe. And it's those 613 laws of peace right there that can solve all of the world's problems. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. It's not complicated, but Yahweh's laws, Yahweh's laws are tried, they're perfect. He knows what the outcome of them. He knows what the outcome is when they're followed. He knows what the result of them are, and he also knows the curses that come from the violation or from the breaking of these laws. And we're probably won't get to that today, but Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 1 through 14 shows the blessings that come from those, and then the curses. The curses actually, or the consequences that come from that, are from verse 15 on. Verse 15 on to the end. But in Isaiah 59, 9 through 15, it shows here that it says that justice is far from us, nor does righteousness overtake us. We wait for light, but only see obscurity, for brightness, but we walk in darkness. Those laws of peace, those laws of light. Remember, the law is light. The laws of Yahweh, they're a lamp to our feet. They show us the path, the way that we need to conduct ourselves in order to live in peace, joy, and abundant living, and in health. But these laws, the people, they wait for light, but they see obscurity, for brightness, but they walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind. We grope as if we have no eyes. We stumble at noonday as in the night. We are in desolate places as the dead. There's no answers in this world. We groan like the bears, all of us. We moan mournfully like the doves. We look for justice, but there is none. There is no justice in this world. Look for salvation, but it is far from us. There is no salvation in this world. The only salvation that is there comes from this house, right here, the house of Yahweh that has been established in the last days. For our transgressions are multiplied before you. For our transgressions are multiplied before you, and our sins testify against us. For our transgressions are with us, and for our iniquities we know them. And in transgressing and lying against Yahweh and turning away from the following of our fathers, speaking oppression and rebellion, conceiving and uttering from the mind the words of falsehood, so that judgment is driven backwards, and judgment stands afar off, for the truth is fallen and in the street, and equity cannot enter. Yes, the truth, the law is suppressed. The law is suppressed now in these last days it is suppressed, but it has been suppressed. And he who departs from evil or upholds the law is accounted as mad and makes himself a prey. We put a target on our back. When we first came to the house of Yahweh, when I gave up, there was a job I had been waiting to and striving to get into. I tried years and years and years to get into this position. I finally got it. I finally made it, and it was something I had worked for several years. Got into it. And lo and behold, probably 6 months after I got there, Yahweh says, you should be keeping the Sabbath. And so that was a little bit of a test, as it is with most of us. What are we going to do? Are we going to keep Yahweh's Sabbath, or are we going to continue to break the Sabbath and continue to work on His Sabbath and our worldly jobs? And when I made the decision to leave, that place, I had people flocking to me. I had several people come Bible in hand, trying to save me from these foolish old laws. And they said, "You're crazy." They said, "You are crazy for doing this. You don't have to do all this. You're crazy. You're going to leave this because of that book and what it says. Jesus did it all for you. You don't have to worry about it. Just believe and you're saved. Come on, come with me here." It was just, you've seen how it's worked. But that's how, but that is how we were looked at. And I remember people shaking their heads. I just can't believe you're doing this. You're crazy. I don't know how many times I was told I was crazy. But the people are counted. When we uphold the law, we're counted as mad. And we do. We do have a target, because you think about what we're doing. When why such the opposition to the Sabbath of Yahweh? What does the Sabbath do for us? What is it? It's the mark of Yahweh. It's one of the things that marks us as belonging to Yahweh. It's a sign that we belong to Him. So it marks us. It's one of those things. Yahweh's Sabbaths and His feast days. That is a mark that shows who we belong to. Now, it's not just the Sabbath and the feast days, but it's all of Yahweh's laws. When we submit to those, we are taking on Yahweh's righteous character, and we are marked as Yahweh's. We belong to Him. But yes, the truth is the truth. The law is suppressed, and he who departs from evil upholds the law is accounted as mad and makes himself a prey. Yahweh saw this, and it displeased Him that there was no justice in the last days. Ironic, isn't it, Pastor says here? He says it's pretty ironic. He says the 613 laws of peace in your Bible have been replaced with man-made laws. And all the people are of the people and by the people for the purpose of keeping them from being taught to the world. Is it any wonder that we do not have peace among us today? And Amos 3, 9 through 11 says, "Publish it in the palaces of Ashdod and in the palaces of the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves on the mountains and of Samaria, and behold the great tumults, the turmoil and destruction within her, and the oppression in her midst." You can see the oppression that is in the midst. "For they do not know to do righteousness, says Yahweh. They who store up violence and robbery in their palaces." They don't know to do righteousness. And they do. They store up these violence. They store up violence. How would you store violence in a palace? How would you store violence? What would be one way that you could do that? You store up weapons of war. You stockpile your bombs, conventional, nuclear, chemical, biological, however you want to look at it, but you can store up these weapons of violence in their palaces. And therefore, this is what Yahweh says: an adversary is surrounding the land, and he will bring down your strength from you, and in the palaces, or your palaces, will be plundered. Now, the word translated adversary in verse 11 above is a Hebrew word tsar. Is number 6862 in Hebrews, Strong Dictionary of Strongs, and it means enemy, adversary, opponent, or foe. But it also means a certain kind of foe, one who inspires certain things to occur. Now notice the rest of the meanings of the word tsar as this source shows. And so we see adversary, afflicted or affliction, anguish, close, distress, enemy, foe, tribulation, trouble. And this word actually comes from another word, 6887, and it means to afflict, to besiege, to bind up, distress, enemy, to oppress, to shut up. And it comes from word 6696, which means to cramp, that is to confine, and many applications, literally and figuratively, formative or hostile, adversary, assault, beset, besiege, to bind up, to cast, distress, to enclose, to lay siege. All the meanings here of the word adversary in Amos 3:11 in the phrase "an adversary is surrounding the land" is seen in the approaches of the governments of the people and by the people to solve crime and bring peace. You think about the words and how, and what is being done to try to solve crime. Now remember, we saw some of those tactics that were used to solve crime and to bring peace. Hosea 3:11 says, "Therefore this is what Father Yahweh says, an adversary is surrounding the land, and he will bring down your strength from you, and your palaces will be plundered." It says we can turn things around and have true peace by using the means we have available now. It says, it is enough, Pastor says here, he says, if enough people were to stand up now and demand what I will now propose, the preachers will stop preaching their lies and the politicians will follow the majority as they've always done. We can turn things around and have true peace. We can stop the wars. We can stop the fighting, the crime, the arrests, the prison problem, simply by changing the laws of destruction that all nations currently teach and enforce, and start teaching the laws of peace to everyone. Pastor has made that clear before. He has made that suggestion. He's made that plea many times before. He says, if you would do, we can put a stop to it. This he says. He has shown. He says we can put a stop to it. We can put an end to it if we turn to Yahweh now and we stop practicing. We stop practicing these laws of the gods and submit to the laws of Yahweh. But he also said, but I know you're not going to do that. He said, I know you're not going to do that. The scriptures show, the prophecies show that mankind won't do that. In Revelation, it shows that even after this 1/3 of mankind is killed over the 1/4 part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates, the prophets actually show there that they still, even after they see these things come to pass, and this massive destruction with that little bit that's going to take place, they're still not going to repent. It shows of the worship of their gods. They're still not going to practice the breaking of these laws, this iniquity. They're going to continue and they're going to persist in doing what it is that they have been doing for 6,000 years. And it's going to take ultimately it's going to take the destruction of 4/5 of the earth's population for mankind to get the picture that their rejection of the laws of Yahweh have brought all these things upon them. And it's going to get to that point. It is going to get to that point, and once it does get to that point, it's at that point that Yahweh will step in. Once the hope of all life is gone from the earth, at that point, Yahweh will step in and put a stop to it. Once they have come to that realization that's what it's going to take. It's pretty close to 8 o'clock, man. So we'll go ahead. We've just got about a minute to go. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop here. We'll begin here on top of page 336 next week. May Yahweh be with you and bless you. May Yahweh bless your work week and keep you safe. If everyone will stand, we'll go ahead and we'll close in prayer. Great and merciful living Father, Yahweh. Father, once again, this is your servant, Yisrayl Hawkins, Father, along with the men of your house, but not only just here at Abel, Father Yahweh, but also scattered abroad, Father. We do ask permission to come before you in unity with the body of priests, through our pastor and overseer, the great Khan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through the authority of your Son, Yahshua Messiah. It's with great joy, Father, we do come before you this evening. We do praise you and thank you once again for the opportunity, Father, to further fill our lamps with oil, Father. And we just pray that, thank you for the understanding and the blessings that you've given to us, and in bringing these things about for us, Father Yahweh, and allowing us to understand these prophecies and the importance of your laws. We do pray that as we do go forth this week, Father, that you would watch over us and guide us, and that you'll help us, Father Yahweh, in our efforts in taking on your perfect righteous character, Father, that all the interactions we have with those who see us, Father Yahweh, will be positive ones, Father Yahweh, that those who see us, Father Yahweh, will see to see the righteous character, Father Yahweh, and see the great benefit, Father Yahweh, that does come from the keeping of your laws. And we do pray that you would continue to bless your people, Father Yahweh, that you would heal the sick and afflicted, that you would watch over the oppressed, Father Yahweh, and those who are incarcerated, especially for the great Kohen Yisrayl Hawkins. May you please be with them all, Father Yahweh, strengthen them and guide them. And please make a way, Father Yahweh, for all those who are desiring to come to your house for this great feast, Father Yahweh, that will soon be upon us. May you please, Father Yahweh, inspire those who are in charge, Father Yahweh, to let the people go, Father Yahweh, so that they can travel to your great house, Father Yahweh, and keep this feast, Father, and to serve you and your people. We do love you, Father Yahweh. We do praise you and thank you for everything you've given to us, and we do ask these blessings in your name, your Son, Yahshua Messiah, Hallelujah.